Hi, everybody. Will Alexander here with this week's interview chair. On the chair this week is the incomparable Laura King. So sit back and listen to Laura for an hour. Hi, everybody. Today's interview chair, the first interview of 2022 is, yes,
special.
Laura King. How are you, Laura?
I'm well, sir. How are you?
Good. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, you had quite the year, but we won't get into that yet. What's that?
It was quite a year.
It was quite a year. A year you can talk about for years to come. I've always done that. All right, let's start. How did you get involved in the sport of dogs, and how old were you when you got involved?
My mother showed Belgian sheepdogs. They had their first show dog when I was born. So anyway, I guess I kind of grew up in it. It was kind of an interesting story there. Her veterinarian was a lady named Bonnie Wilcox, who, I don't know if some people remember, co-authored several books with Chris Walkowitz on dog breeding and so forth here in the States.
Sounds familiar, yes.
Yeah, and my mother had a long-haired black German Shepherd that was severely dysplastic and had taken her to the vet, and Bonnie had asked if she was a Belgian sheepdog. And that was the second dysplastic Shepherd my mother had. And so she decided maybe she was going to venture into something a little healthier, and ended up with a Belgian sheepdog. And part of the contract was that she was required to finish its championship. And so that's kind of how we got started in dogs.
Well, very good. So you were a baby, so you didn't really know it. Well, what's your first memory of the sport of dogs?
There's a few. I remember sitting, at the time it was safe. Like, she would sit me down ringside and I was supposed to stay. And of course I never did that and wandered off. And I remember, sadly, one of the first memories I have is of some police coming looking for me because I had gone off to play like cowboys and Indians with some other kids at the dog show. And I ended up being the Indian tied up, and they left me in some abandoned building on the fairgrounds.
That's kind of frightening, actually.
Yeah, exactly. A little different scenario than these days. But anyway, I'm fine. Or so we think. Yeah, right, exactly.
So how old were you then?
I must have been maybe 4.
Oh, wow.
4 or 5, yeah. I was little.
Yeah.
And then eventually they got me, they decided the Belgian sheepdogs were too big for me. And so they got me a Schipperke. Mm-hmm. And that was my first show dog myself. Her name was Bridget.
And how old were you when you went into the ring then?
I was 7.
Okay.
7. And we finished her championship, and I put a CDX on her.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I give my parents credit for that because I think it took like 36 tries to get her CDX, and they kept letting me enter. So.
And from there, from 7, you went probably into the juniors world?
Yeah, I was involved in 4-H, and my mother was the leader, the 4-H leader, and so we were heavily involved with that, and through juniors, and I'm pretty sure I was this weird little stalker kid that would just go and sit and stare. I can't imagine, like, Ken and Virginia Murray must have thought I was the weirdest little shit ever because I would just sit and stare at them all day long while they were showing dogs. And I don't think I realized at the time you could be an apprentice. I don't think that was a thing that I was aware of. And so anyway, did that. And then I would work for them a few weekends, and I worked for a few other people just on weekends.
How did you go up and ask Ken and Virginia what happened?
How I remember it is that a friend of mine was working there, and she was the one that was like, well, you could come and work a couple of weeks. And I think I helped them just, here and there a couple of weekends. it wasn't really, I don't know, for whatever reason, it wasn't on my radar. I don't know whether we had discussed, like, I wasn't going to be allowed to go to work for people or what the deal was. But I was also kind of heavily involved in a lot of school stuff. I played softball, shocking, and basketball and volleyball, and did a bunch of other stuff. And so I was spreading myself thin with dog shows throughout high school and college. I didn't go to a whole bunch of dog shows during that time.
Okay, so let's skip ahead to then. So you're through education to that point, and how did you get back into dogs, and how did you become a professional handler?
I took an unconventional route, I would say. I had been during the times I was going to school, high school, and then the first part of college. I had been traveling with a now passed away boxer lady named Audrey Gerhardy, and had been her assistant, so to speak. I mean, she wasn't really a big handler, but she was a pretty strict authoritarian as far as the care of the dogs and that sort of thing. So I picked up a lot of knowledge from her as well. And I think I'd always thought that I wanted to be a handler. I don't know. It wasn't something, as I was being brought up, that was offered up as a profession, as a viable option. And so I didn't, after I finished my bachelor's degree, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so the next best option was to go back to school. So I re-enrolled and was going to work on my master's degree. I had, I went to the school at University of Iowa, and they have a huge medical school there. Actually, it's physically the largest in the United States, I believe. And I decided I wanted to go to physical therapy school, but I was an out-of-state resident, and my grade point average might not have been high enough from spending a couple of years dorking around. And so I established residency in Iowa and went to work on my master's degree so that I could reapply to the medical school to be admitted. And about halfway through that process, a lady who had been Audrey's client kind of offered me a deal I didn't at the time want to refuse. Offered me the use of her motorhome and to show a couple of dogs. And so I was like, oh yeah, that's what I'll do. So I quit school and became a famous dog handler in my mind.
So how old were you when you quit school and decided to?
24.
24?
24, yeah.
And so how long did you started showing this woman's boxers? Is that they were boxers?
I did. And actually during that time, we had a lovely lady that hired us to show her Samoyed. It was who actually she now owns a striker son. Anyway, yeah, right. Full circle. Yes, exactly. But anyway, and Corey and I started dating around that time period as well. And so he went to work for Clay, and what is the rest history?
No.
Worth a shot.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all good.
So when did you? Okay, you. Corey was off working for Clay. When did you guys become a team after that?
Yeah, we got engaged while he was working there, and the concept was that he would come back, we would get married and start a business, which we did do.
Yeah, I remember.
We were renting property from a Dalmatian client of ours at the time, and then a friend of ours, a Rottweiler guy that lives in the area, found the property actually that I'm on now. It was coming up for auction.
Oh, nice.
And so, yeah, Corey went with my mother and my grandmother, as I recall it, to the auction, and we ended up getting the property and kind of slowly built it up from there.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And what dogs were you showing at that point? What What was your first prominent dog at that point?
Well, in my head,
your head is still. You may think it was probably a prominent dog.
Yeah, in my head, I was showing a dog who was the number one AM staff at the time, and he won a handful of groups. When I say that, maybe 15 groups. He's one of those dogs. Robin and I always laugh about, like, what dog do you wish you had that you could do again? That you had too early on in your career.
Yeah.
That he was a really good dog. The dog's name was Bill. We called him Little Pit Bill. I would say that was probably the first one. And I also was, at the time, I was still kind of involved in the obedience club in the area. And there was a lady there named Chris Jones who had purchased a Newfoundland from Marg Wilmot, actually. Mm-hmm. And so I showed him a little bit, which sort of put me in touch with Kathy Griffin of Seabrook, Newfoundlands. And then ultimately I was able to show, I would say that was probably the first big winning dog that I had. His name was the Headmaster. Bud was his call name. And he won, I'm going to say he won maybe 8 or 9 best in shows. And it was a top working dog. But I won my first best in show on that dog.
Wow. Because I do remember, see, back then I thought of you as Newfoundlands.
Newfoundlands, yes. Yeah. So that was kind of how we got worked into that.
And
actually,
after that, let's jump ahead.
Oh boy.
We don't need to go into family stuff or anything, but
yeah, right.
Where did you go from there?
Well, there's a few years in there I'm not really clear on. Just kidding. We'll skip on this now. So we had several Newfoundlands for Kathy that were big winners. I would say probably over the years we ended up winning, I don't know, 18 or 20, maybe more than that, best in shows on dogs of her.
Like you were always winning best in shows with Newfoundlands. So.
Yeah. And then, you know how things progress, right? So we had a lady who backed one of Kathy's dogs, and then for the next one, Kathy didn't have really anything available. So we went and bought a dog from Dave and Peggy Helming. That dog's name was Politician, Pouch Cove's Politician. And he did quite a bit of winning. I think he ended up with 19 or 20 best in shows. And we stopped showing him kind of in the middle of the year that we were showing him. Anyway, and during that time, actually, Corey had gone to the National and seen an English cocker dog of a lady who lived near us, who he thought was quite a good dog. He wasn't wrong. And put together a deal with a backer for that dog. And so we sort of morphed into showing that dog. His name was Copper. And yeah. And anyway, sort of through that, we got introduced to Doug, and Jamie had just moved up to the States at that point. And when Copper was done, we showed a number of clumbers for him, and eventually a few English toy spaniels, and an
Irish setter.
And an Irish setter that did okay. It was a cool dog.
Yeah, I remember that dog as well. So we've gone from, so let's jump ahead again.
Okay.
Let's see when you and Robin met and or got together and things started, we started to get really busy at that point. So
yeah, there was, I mean, obviously we'd known each other for years. Years and years. Yeah. But we first started, like, I don't know what you want to call it, traveling together, dating, whatever weird little thing you want to call it, probably in like May of 2010. I'm going to be in trouble that I don't remember that year, but initially, I mean, we were, combining two businesses. And so we were traveling with two giant trucks full of dogs. And I mean, maybe showing like 40 dogs on a weekend, which is
crazy.
Yeah, it's insanity. And so we finally managed to kind of amalgamate everything. I mean, we still show too many dogs for me, but we've got it down to one truck anyway, usually. So that's kind of good. It was, and it was, it's a tricky balance there when you're combining two existing businesses. We were very fortunate. Most of the clients were incredibly gracious and understanding through that whole process. And we've ended up with a fantastic client base that we have now.
And you guys have been through quite a few top dogs since joining forces.
Yes.
Well, so.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. We've done extremely well. Extremely well. Very fortunate. Those things don't always. There's a lot of probably really good dogs out there that could win a lot, but the circumstances never, align to allow that sort of thing to happen. So we've been very fortunate in that sense.
Yeah, timing is everything.
Timing is everything. Exactly. Get all the pieces to fall into place.
Well, before I delve into more, let's start. I want to get into Striker because you had such an amazing run with him. And what was the total so far?
He has 93.
93 best in shows.
Yeah.
Did you ever think of yourself that you'd show a dog that won 93 best in shows?
No, I mean, you always
sure.
That's your pipe dream, when I was a little kid, of course, I'm going to have the top winning all of the things ever, and then when you get into the reality of it, you're like, oh yeah, that's not a thing. And so, I mean, it's an incredible thing, especially in my mind, and maybe this worked to our advantage or maybe it didn't, I don't know. But because of the timing of the dog, we got him and 6 weeks later, the country shuts down. Dog shows shut down, and we have effectively 4 months where we don't do anything. And then when the shows start back up, there are no options. Like there is a dog show on the weekend, and so you go, and you have to compete against every other top dog in the country. And we went through that until I would say probably March or April of this year. There were no options.
Okay, I want to go back to. How did you and Striker get together?
Well, I mean, again, like you said, it's a lot of luck that goes with it. Judy, as you know, Alfred, his breeder, showed him in Canada in 19 and did quite well with him there. I think she won 55 best in shows up there.
Yeah, oh yeah, he was beautiful. Yeah. We noticed him right from the very beginning.
Yeah.
He always had beautiful dogs, but Striker got us all. So.
Yeah. Well, anyway. He had won the group in Orlando I think that must have been 18, if I'm doing my math correctly, under Bill Shelton.
I remember that.
And he caught a lot of people's attention there. And I know that she was approached by a couple of different people as far as running a campaign down here. And she really had her heart set on showing him up there, which is fantastic. And sort of by default, we'd gotten to know her just, showing against each other here and there. And she had known Mark and Kareen for years, showing Siberians. Apparently you all do it in alphabetical order. Yeah. So they were always next to each other in the group ring. Yeah. And so, they all knew each other. That was all great. And we were looking for a dog. Maze had retired, and we had tried out a couple of other.
He had an amazing career with a Maze as well. So.
Right, exactly. And anyway, so we were kind of looking for something to show, and it was sort of mentioned, well, maybe Striker would be available. And so I had. We showed him in Louisville in 2019. Judy was judging somewhere and couldn't show him, so she sent him down for that. And we kind of clicked and hit it off. And then I came up actually and showed him at Erie Shores.
Yeah, I remember that.
Which was an eye opener. He was, she made it look really easy. Like, oh, she runs and he's great and it's all good. And I was up there with Sarah Perchik, and so I showed him in the breed. I'm the only one the first day. And it was a disaster, like a disaster. And I come out of the ring and she's kind of just staring at me. And I'm like, so how was that? She's like, that was terrible. She's like, you're never going to win anything with this dog. So I tried to blame it on the grass. the grass was really long. It was just awful. And she conceded a little bit after she had to show her dog. But anyway, we had a little work to do. But we got it together. And so then it was sort of arranged. And Judy brought him down to show to give to us in Talmadge, Ohio, which were the first shows of the year down here. And we took him down to Brooksville from there. And he won, I think, 3 best in shows on that circuit. And kind of got us going. So it was kind of, yeah. And I will say the first breed in Brooksville is a supported entry. And I think there must have been, I don't know, 10 or 12 specials. And I couldn't get him settled down to save my life. And I must have run, she had us go, I'm going to say, and I'm not exaggerating, I bet we did 8 or 10 go-arounds until he finally calmed down enough that she was like, all right, that's it. That's the break before he messes up again. So, yeah. But anyway, we got it together by the end.
Though.
What's that?
There's always issues in great campaigns, though.
Oh, yeah.
So how did... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it was an interesting time. Then Judy had a couple of puppies that she had sent with another handler down there. And I don't know, like, he didn't know the puppies. Obviously he didn't know the handler. And it was a disaster. Like, he could see those and smell those puppies from like 3 tenths away. And so I did win a couple of the breeds where effectively I just would turn around and stand behind him with my arm up while he just stood staring at the puppies, barking at them. So it was somewhat of a miracle that he managed to win a few of those breeds down there. He's recovered since then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you've obviously
he's done okay.
Become one since you have 9. Yeah. So the stats are done. So you ended up number 1 dog of the year for 2021.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does that feel?
Again, I mean, kind of incredible, right? Again, I'm going to be this, and then you don't really ever see it happening. And he had been starting in February. He'd had a fairly decent lead. You never try to. You never want to, I don't know, count anybody out really at that point. I said, with my luck, David Fitzpatrick will, he'll be like, I've never done this before. I'm going to give somebody a 50,000 point lead. And then I've never tried to do that. So let me see if I could do that. Because he's the guy that could do it, right? Deservedly so. But you're like, oh, this is how my luck goes. So we started feeling fairly good about it. Kind of Morris and Essex was the marker for us. We wanted to get through Morris and Essex with a pretty good lead, and we managed to do that. So then after that, we were able to kind of calm down a little bit, I think.
Yeah. So it's a hard run, though. It's hard.
Oh, yeah.
Emotionally, mentally.
Right. And again, like I said, the first 3 to 4 months of the year, there weren't options. As far as shows, we went to Florida. We did I think we did 6 weeks in a row in Florida at the beginning of this year because those were the only shows available. With
everybody.
With everybody. Yes, exactly. 2,000-3,000 dog shows, you're getting done at 8:00 at night and, getting up next morning and doing it. And, the dog held up. It speaks volumes to Judy and her breeding program, and just the way she managed his early career. His brain is in it. He's not, he's able to focus and stay with it, and that's not something a male Samoyed really could ever do. That's across the board. When people talk about how remarkable the dog is, especially Samoyed people, it's about his attitude and how he's kept at it.
Sure.
Totally true.
You see some dogs' campaigns and they go up and they level off, and as they go, they sometimes drop a bit and then come back. His is just I've never seen him down. He went from that exuberant young dog to this show dog now. So. Right. He's been remarkable. They all have a little off day here and there, but the consistency that he's managed is incredible. Yeah.
So there's it speaks to his heart for sure.
And even though it was hard at the beginning with the COVID and whatnot, and having to go to the one shows. I think that sort of made it a stamp that how good he was, because it didn't matter who was there. He was still there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, with the change in the dates of Westminster, is that going to change anything for you? Like, what's going to happen?
Well,
it's a tough question, isn't it? So.
Yeah, and I'm not sure we actually do know yet what we're doing. You need 7 to get to 100. Initially, I'm a little mad at myself. If I had a little more foresight, I would have planned this a little differently. And probably we would have done all of Florida. But as it stands now, he's entered in one Albury dog show in the month of January, which we are going to pick up a few more, obviously. So it's sort of up in the air. It's going to kind of depend on when they reschedule for. I don't necessarily want it. We had no intentions of showing him for an entire other year.
Exactly.
But, at this point, you don't want to also let him sit for 8 months or 9 months until the garden comes around, depending on when that is. So for now, we're just going to show him, try to get to the 100. And Mark and Kareen and I have talked about 110 as a nice number now, which is double what the old record was. And so we floated that number, but I honestly don't know what we're doing. I know that this weekend I'm going to Ohio.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. I think that we're going to try to get him to some judges who haven't had him before, just because there was, because of COVID, there were limited opportunities to show him to a variety of people. So we'll maybe try to get him to some people that haven't had the chance to see him. Just kind of play it by ear, I think, at this point, unfortunately.
Well, you've been an amazing team to watch, and I know,
thank you.
I'm glad it's not over, because we'll carry on from there. I want to go back now, and I want to get into mentors. But who do you consider your mentors in this sport?
Well, I mean, my mother, I'm going to try to do this, was like fantastic. I mean, she had great work ethic. When I was growing up, like we had to help care for the dogs. We didn't keep a lot of dogs. I was maybe 10. But we were responsible. My sister and I were responsible for, feeding and cleaning and, maintaining their cages and their runs and the yards and all of that kind of stuff. And so I really, really would credit her with, the majority of it. And then Audrey Gerhardy she was a crazy lady, but, again, she was, super, super strict about the care of the dogs. Everything for the dogs came first.
Yeah,
and so, great. Yeah. And so that's always like in the back of my mind. That's always, it sits there, right? The dogs always come first. Their care comes first. So, yeah. Beyond that, like I said, I was this weird little kid that would just sit all day long at the dog show and stare at all the professional handlers.
You probably have mentors, so they don't know we're your mentors. So.
Yeah, right. That's the thing. And so a lot of, you pick up a lot of stuff sitting and watching, which I think a lot of people don't do enough of anymore. Their dog shows at 9, they're there at 8:55, show their dog, and they're gone by 9:30 to breakfast or whatever they're doing. Yeah. And I think that's a lost art of sitting around and watching. When I traveled with my mom, we would sit all day long. That's it, let's get our lawn chairs and go up to watch the group ring and sit and watch all the groups and best in show and discuss dogs and their characteristics and movements and the standards. We would, driving to and from dog shows, we'd had our book of standards, and we'd open it up and read a little quote in the standard and talk about something that we'd seen that day and whatever. So, I would say that was the biggest part of my learning process.
Well, that's an education, really. It is.
Yeah.
You have those hours driving, and the same with me. I remember talking about it with my mom and dad about all the dog shows and the dogs and even where we were going. I always amazed. It's fine now, but it amazed me when I was a kid that my dad remembered where all these dog shows were. Just
you just go there, no problem, right? Exactly.
You punch it in your phone and you wait for them to tell you.
One time, we actually, you had asked about memories, and now this is coming back to me. We went to go watch the Chicago International when it was still held at the Stockyards, and we didn't take any dogs. We were just going up to watch. And I remember two things specifically about that trip. And I would have to guess it was like in 78, 77, 78, 79. I'd have to look. But I was sitting on the floor of our van, and I had the map in front of me. And she was telling me we were something. And I said, well, I don't think we're on the right road. And she was like, yeah, we're whatever. And so I was like, no. And so we pulled over, and sure enough, that was my first lesson in reading maps. We weren't on the right road. So we got there a little late. But the other thing I remember from that experience is Kiss Me Kate was shown there, and she was best in show there. And I'm sure I'm glamorizing this, but, we're sitting in the stands, and she was down on the floor, and it was this beautifully done up, building for Stockyards. And she just stood. I mean, that was my first introduction to what poodly meant, right? She just stood there and stared at all the other dogs, like with this look of disgust on her face. As they all did there, they went down the back and did their thing. And she just stood there like this, had this whole air about her. And I was like, oh my God, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And I do believe she won, but I don't remember that part. What I do remember is just her like poodleness. And
sometimes the performance outweighs what actually happens.
Yeah, exactly.
I have memories of dogs the same way, and I have no idea if they won or not. I just remember what they did to me. Or they left.
Right, exactly. So, anyway, sorry, I digress.
No, that was great. I want more of those things. So what's next now for Laura?
Well, I mean, a fair amount of sleep would be nice.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. We have a nice young English Cocker dog. We are, we love our Springer dog that we have right now. We get a new Catone. I mean, we're starting a whole bunch of new dogs, with the exception of Striker and the Springer. So
it's always exciting, isn't it?
It is. Kind of looking forward to seeing how they settle and kind of getting in their brains. It's a little, it's good for me. It's a little distracting. You have one dog, all the time, and it's the same kind of, you try to do the same routine and do all that stuff, and you kind of have to remind yourself to kind of keep it fresh. And so it's a new avenue that we can go down with these new dogs to try to get into their heads and know what the right way to do everything is.
Exactly. So, and you never know. Yeah. And you never know who that dog might end up being, right?
Right. Exactly.
That was fun. So far in your career, do you have a few wins that stand out in your head?
Well, my first Best in Show was under Mrs. Clark with the Newfoundland. And actually, this is a good story too. So she had done the group. It was the two shows in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And at the time, Michael Shepard had one of his boxers that was a big winner. And Ron Buxton had a Rottweiler that was a big winner there. And I believe, I think that Brenda Combs had a Schnauzer that she had been doing some winning with. And anyway, to my recollection, like 3 or 4 of the top working dogs in the country were at that show. And there's little old me with my Newfoundland dog that had been showing for a few months, and he'd won a couple of things. But Mrs. Clark did the working group on the Saturday show, and I made the cut but didn't place. And I thought, whatever. I was pretty proud of that performance, actually, because I felt it was like this spectacular group. And the next day, Houston Clark did the group. And this Newfoundland dog would have been right up his alley. And now, knowing what I know, I shouldn't have been as shocked as I was. But anyway, so we won the group under Houston Clark. And Mrs. Clark was doing Best in Show. And I don't know if you remember, but, she never came out and gave a big speech about, oh, these are all beautiful dogs, and thank you so much. She would just walk out and point. And so I wasn't quite prepared for that. And she walked out. She said, I'll have the Newfoundland. And I said out loud, holy shit. And we went to take the picture, and she said to me, "Dear, may I give you some advice?" Of course. I mean, who doesn't want advice from her? She said, "It's best not to curse when the judge awards you a ribbon." Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you. And she would always remind me of that when we would see her. Like, keeping it clean today, young lady? Well, try, ma'am. I don't know.
That's a good sticks out in your mind, though.
Yeah. So anyway, so that win stands out for obvious reasons. The Siberian National was amazing. Winning any national is kind of a neat thing. Just because it's it's like the epitome of it's the pinnacle of all of the breed judging that goes on there. So those all stick out in my head. But the Siberian National was especially fun. Bart Miller did that, and it was it was a beautiful entry of dogs, top winning dogs that had been winning a lot, and he made a great contest of it, and Amaze never let down. Like, she just gave 110%. Like when they hit it, you get kind of chills up your back, and
what's happening. You can feel.
Yeah, it's happening, right? Exactly. And then obviously, winning the group at the Garden and at Morris and Essex. Those are, incredible wins that you can't. Same thing. You get, you can feel the electricity in the air. So those are kind of spectacular.
More memories coming. Let's keep our fingers crossed.
Well, I hope so.
Advice for young handlers?
Well, first of all, don't be the freak that I was. Be brave. Go up and speak to the handlers.
Turned out pretty well.
yeah, I guess. But it's back to think I probably would have done that differently if I'd known what I know now. But go and learn the animal husbandry parts of this sport. The time that you're in the ring has so very little to do with the win.
Yeah.
All of that work occurs outside the ring and during the week, and mentally getting to know the dogs and knowing their quirks and understanding them and feeling, what they're feeling. So spend the time to do that. Don't just, want to go to the dog show and work for somebody for 20 minutes and, take some dog back in. That's not learning to be a handler. You have to go and clean the puppy's crate at 3:00 in the morning and, get up at 6 and traverse across the country and do all of that hard work. And learn what it takes to take care of the animals so that they give you 110% in the ring every time.
Exactly.
And that's to me, that's the best thing that I ever learned.
Yes, and I have had people over the years work for me that it's amazing how their natural instincts take over. They were so dog oriented that they could read the dog, and they would come to me. I think so and so's not feeling great, and they were usually right. And sometimes those things can't be taught. There has to be a part of it. Right. Correct.
Well, other advice. Other advice. I don't know. Don't eat yellow snow. The other thing that I am really glad that I did, as much as it maybe, took away a little bit from the dog showing, but I'm very forever grateful that my parents made me go to college. That's an experience, obviously I don't use my degree, but I do in every sense. You learn so many things about just, I don't know, independence, like taking care of yourself, managing. And I think a lot of handlers don't understand the business aspect of the business. And so, learning to be a business person, because you are running a small business. In addition to caring for all of these animals, you have to, at some point, hopefully you're paying for your house and your truck and your kennel and, employees, and all of those things come into play. And so it's to me, it's very important to have some knowledge of how to do that well.
The question, you watch so many over the years, you've seen the ones that are so good at business and the ones that aren't so good at business.
Right. Exactly.
It's not always pretty. So
no, sadly. Yeah. So
do you have any aspirations to be a judge?
I don't know. I'm torn. I mean, I'm really good at it from outside the ring. Like I never miss. Never. I have done
Marshall, Michigan. Maryland, we did that. I stopped by, and you just had Stryker with you, I think, and so you had time to spend with me at ringside. That was fun. That was
fun. We got it exactly right. You got it exactly right. I have had the opportunity to judge. I got to judge a Gold Cup in Italy for Newfoundlands a few years ago, and a few few sweepstakes here and there, that sort of thing. And it's an eye-opening experience about how different it is from inside the ring versus outside. Everybody that stands outside complains about the judges and this, how they didn't see this or they missed that. It's a whole different experience. All those people should have to go and do it before you ever get to criticize. So that being said, I do kind of enjoy the process of it. The way the application process works now in the States, I don't see it happening in the next couple of years just because, I don't know, in order to, from a business standpoint, obviously, in order to get to the point where we could make a similar amount of money to what we're making now, would take a 2 or 3 year, being generous, process. And so during those 2 or 3 years, you would need some other form of income, which I don't really,
it's a hard.
We don't have that. Yeah, exactly. So, it's not something I'm against, but it's not something I'm planning on doing in the next, near future. So
it's a big decision, and with the process, you're right. We've lost out on so many people that just don't want to go through the process because
exactly.
It, so.
And it's I don't know. Without getting too much into it, it's kind of a statement of today's society, where AKC changed the rules a bit so that they could give Peter Green the whole terrier group. I don't know why you would have to change the rules for that.
Exactly.
Give him whatever he wants. There's not, they're cutting off their nose to spite their face in those certain circumstances. And the problem is that they do that. And then people who maybe bred 3 or 4 champions who've been in dogs for 35 years, but they had no good dogs and never did anything, can say, well, I was in dogs every bit as long as he's been in dogs. So why can't I have a whole group? And the easy answer is you're not the same. If you can't see that you're not the same, then, you shouldn't be judging dogs anyway.
Exactly.
Someone said to me recently, and I hadn't heard it put this way, but it makes perfect sense. If they want to run the AKC as a business, then run it as a business. In a corporation, if you're not good at what you do, you don't advance.
Exactly.
You don't advance, and you get peer reviewed, and then maybe you get canned. And so, I strongly feel like there should be some sort of process in place for that. And not for nothing, I think they also need to figure out a way to invite judges, people who have spent their lives dedicated to the sport of dogs, who are residents of other countries, who live here now, that aren't able to, that they make them go back through the process again, which there needs to be some reciprocity with FCI or the delegating body, whatever their body of where they learned to judge was, to allow those people in, because we're losing great judges because of that.
Exactly.
And it's disappointing for sure.
So because in the sports analogy, you see someone like back in the day, a Russian hockey player would come to Canada. Well, you know what? He was already this good, so he stayed that good.
Right, exactly. Yeah, he didn't have to go back. Right. So there needs to be something put into place for that, because, people live here who lived other countries and spent their whole years, lives in dogs. We should be able to acknowledge that without them having to start over from the same process, having, back to the stage one. It seems silly to me.
I agree, because you take someone that's already become top 10 in what they do.
Right.
Because they choose to live in your country, they have to start over again. So.
Right. Yeah, that seems silly to me. So
it is a difficult. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we better get off that.
Yeah. It's a rabbit hole that we don't need to go down, probably.
Hey, not until we run the world, Laura.
Yeah, right. Hey, no. Oh my God, we'd be so good at it.
Exactly. Okay. You've had lots of apprentices over the years.
We have.
Yes, you've had some wonderful ones. Can you maybe explain your teaching process to some of your apprentices? Because you've had some amazing ones that just people would give their eye teeth to have those apprentices.
Right, exactly. I don't know that I have a specific mindset, like as far as that goes, but first of all, we participate.
Something's working.
Yeah, something's working. We participate at least in the morning, every morning, with taking care of the dogs. And I think that that goes a long way with a lot of these people in that hopefully they're watching and emulating, what you're doing. And the fact that we're willing to be hands-on in that sense. Like that is one of the things we say, like, we'll never ask them to do something that we wouldn't do ourselves, right, or that we haven't done ourselves. I mean, we've all been there. Caring for a kennel full of dogs is not always the most glamorous thing in the world, right? It's work. It's not rocket science, but it's work. Right. And, we've all been there, knee deep in whatever, puppy poop or whatever. So I mean, I do think that probably helps us a bit, is that we would never ask them to do something that we are not willing to do ourselves.
And that sends a great message as far as I'm concerned. So.
Right, exactly. And hopefully it instills some sort of a work ethic in them, in that, these are the things that need to be done, and so we have to do them before we do these other things, whatever. That being said, we try to express our appreciation for them as much as possible, and try to involve them, like listen to what they have to say. Like you were saying earlier about, your kid would come to you and say, I don't think so-and-so is feeling well. So we try to listen and then say, okay, well, what is it about that what is he doing different than they would normally? And then involve them, engage them in a conversation as to how to move forward, why we would be doing this because of this. And so just to be respectful of their opinions and to listen to them, and maybe in the end, we still are like, no, you're going to do it my way. But, to try to make them feel like they're participating instead of they're just there to, just to do the crap work.
Right. Because it is hard when they don't feel they're part of a team, when they just feel they're just an employee or a labor.
Right. Exactly.
Being proud of what you guys do is an important thing. I always found with my assistants, they were always proud that so-and-so did well.
Right.
And that's important.
Right. Exactly. And that was, we actually had this conversation this morning, and there's so many things that go into it, but as far as like Stryker winning his 100th Best in Show, like I don't want to be off at some dog show randomly by myself for him to win that. We want the whole team to be there to be able to experience that together, because everybody has put, years of work into it and lots of effort and blood, sweat, and tears. And so of course they should all be there. So, you don't get to orchestrate those things, but you can do as much to manage it as possible. So
let's hope that'd be nice.
Yeah. So anyway, involving them in that sense, though, so that, let them acknowledge that they've, worked their butts off and give them some reward for that. So
it happened. Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. One last question. I'll let you get back.
Oh, boy. Yeah. No, that's too bad.
If you were to meet the 20-year-old Laura, is there any advice you'd give her now?
Ooh. Probably can't say that.
You tell me later.
Yeah, right. Cherish the time with your family more. Don't blow it off. Try to keep as much of a balance between business and pleasure. Don't submerge yourself so much that you go crazy, because in the end, these are dog shows and they're dogs, and try to enjoy every moment of it as much as you can. Because that's
that works.
So yeah.
All right. Well, your internet held out, so we made it.
It did. That was lucky. I don't know what happened there. The wind stopped blowing for once.
All right. Well, it was great to catch up with you, and
You too.
I hope to see you soon at some shows.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you. Stay safe.
You too.
Okay.
Thanks, Laura. That was great. You've had an incredible year, that's for sure. If you like what we're doing here, make sure you press the like, share, and subscribe button. If you want to get a hold of me, get a hold of me at dogshowtips@gmail.com. Or if you want to find out about what's happening in Will's world, go to willalexander.net. Don't forget about our podcast on Thursdays with myself and Wayne Kavanaugh, The Dog Show Drive. Till next week, guys. Take care.